There we go. Okay. So I'm going to create a new camera here. And that lives here. Layer, new camera. And remember, all of this you can basically ignore, all of these settings. So this is the camera tool. Thanks. This is made for controlling the camera. And essentially, you can click and drag and you can see these different modes. You can also use various mouse combinations. If any of you have ever used Maya, played around 3D, you're familiar with the different mouse button combinations to move around 3D space. This has the same. I'm on a trackpad here, so I probably won't have them all. But notice that I'm doing here, that I'm moving this camera tool around and it's not doing anything. Does anyone know why that is? Right. You have to switch on this guy, the 3D switch. Now we can move around 3D space. So again, the camera tool here, Command, Option, Shift. I forget the different hotkeys, and I said it's meant to be used with a 3-button mouse. But if you're stuck, you can always press the letter C or click on this drop-down menu here. So here is rotate. I mean, these are confusingly named. Rotate. This is rotate. This is pan, and this is zoom. So zoom in and out. Rotate. Pan. This is nice. This didn't exist before 5.5. If you have an older version of After Effects, or you simply want to sort of conceptually simplify working with a camera, you can use parenting. You can create a new null. I'm going to call this camera position. Remember, null is just a layer that doesn't show up in our rendering. It's just used for control. I'm going to call this cam position. And I'm going to make this a 3D layer. I'm going to parent the camera to it. And I'm going to lock the camera so I can't actually affect that directly. So now I can simply drag the null around, and it will affect. Even though this is what you used to have to do in After Effects because there was no camera tool before 5.5. A lot of steps if you're not familiar with parenting, and but I kind of like the simplicity of this sometimes. I'm also here and now I'm rotating it. This control null. What's also nice about this is that you don't end up tilting the camera unless you want to, because we're not in true 3D, right? We're in 2.5D. So this may be, although it looks more complicated to set up, this may be simpler, right? It may be conceptually simpler because now we can really only just move this around in space, and here, zoom it in and out. So let's make this a little more interesting. I'm going to move a couple of these guys around. I'm going to duplicate. Notice that positive depth comes towards the camera, and negative goes away. Now here we have our little animated GIFs. Does everyone know how you'd quickly knock out the background here? Right, you would put effect, color key. Of course, there might be a more sophisticated way to do this. Yeah.
Even brightest one. Okay, well, it computes simpler. It only computes one channel, not three. No, the other way around. Key out brighter.
Right.
Boom. Pulls up. Pull the value up to 250.
Nice. Cool. 2, 4, 5.
And
very nice.
Or feather it.
Now this isn't totally foolproof. Keying without an alpha channel is always, I mean, look at the different parts of the guys that are gone. Keying is always a sort of dicey business. But you know how you can copy and paste effects, right? Everyone does it. If you have an effect you'd like to duplicate across several different things, Command-C and Command-V to paste this on other layers. Now, here is some place we can use a really simple expression. I think I've gone over this before, but it's worth repeating. Enable time remapping. And here, if I want to option click and type loop out cycle, this will run in an indefinite loop. Now, with all these effects and the expression, with all this put on one layer, and you really don't want to be copying all this over multiple times. So the best thing to do at this point would be to put this into a pre-comp. Right? I said layer pre-compose. And then I can just alt drag. I'm going to select these two. You can replace something in the timeline by alt dragging on top of it. This is hugely important. We're going to use that in all of our processing sketches when we generate generate solids, like the flopping example we showed before, and you alt drag your own stuff on top of it. Although we may not have moved the time. Yeah, we haven't moved. I made a mistake here. We haven't moved the time remap inside the comp. So let's just quickly. But that's no problem because when you change a composition, right, it updates everywhere it's referenced. So if here I say layer, time remapping, and I do that again, loop out cycle. Yeah, there we go. Now let's try depth of field. Has anyone played around with this yet? Depth of field now? Does anyone know what depth of field is? Okay. Yeah, a little live video shooting. You've had some under the camera animation experience, right? Last year, did everyone do that? Yeah. Were you using animation stands? Did you have access to those? No, not really. What did you animate on?
We used After Effects mostly.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a shame. Like, there's nothing really beats under the camera animation experience. You can get a copy stand, or even just point a small tripod down and begin moving things around under, underneath the camera and grabbing frames one at a time. It's a really great way to animate stuff, especially if you find what we're doing here really confusing, because all of this is based on the metaphor of a downward pointing camera. So does everyone? I mean, you've probably covered some sort of at UI design class that talked about interface metaphors before.
Not with that.
Well, not with that specifically, but the metaphor for a word processor as a typewriter. A lot of times, we get really confused when we have no direct experience with the metaphor the software is based on. For instance, nonlinear editors like Premiere, and how many of you ever cut film? Like actually, yeah?
Mine's or used it bang.
Yeah, exactly, right. Now, I've never, you can see if you dig around a website some of the stuff I've done on film. I've never accomplished much in it. I doubt I would have actually been up to much if video had never been invented, because I'm way too clumsy to go around cutting things with razor blades and tape and no undo. But that's how you edited film. You cut it and then taped it together. And then you made a fresh print from that. So a lot of our metaphors, if you used a video editing program, why is it a razor blades, the way you move things around, all this comes from old film editing practices. So in turn, After Effects is, and I will sketch this here because, oh wait, yeah, but wait, real life. All right. Nice. Okay, so a camera setup is typically, this is a little skewed here, but this is basically how you would shoot animation under a camera. That's how you would do it. You did it before computer animation. Into the 80s, like most of the Saturday morning cartoons, if you grew up then, were still shot on film by putting drawings one after the other under one of these cameras. If you wanted to do special effects, you covered the lens of the camera, backed up the film, and then put. How many of you have tried additive compositing in Photoshop? Anybody? Come on, everybody. Right? Composite modes, add, lighten. We're going to go over these if you don't show your hands. I'm only on board quickly. Okay, yeah. Okay, all right. So those come also. A lot of those effects come from film. Like a lot of those techniques. Not specifically implemented with graphics, but you would, if you wanted to do, say, a glowing laser blast, you would paint just the laser blast on a black background. You'd back up the film and put just those drawings underneath the camera and rephotograph them for double exposure. You can do some crazy things, and we're going to touch on this at the end of class. You can do some crazy things playing around with sand animation. You can put a light under this. This could be glass. Put a light underneath. And you can put sand on top, and you can make drawings by brushing away the sand. All these are sort of standard, or you can make this a layer of clay and then carve away at it. All these are great animation exercises, and they or serious ways of creating elements for your own work. And that is what After Effects is doing. It's metaphor. Like, let's get back to here. This is the view from that camera. Right? This is a side view of your table. Because what you would do is you would put layers on top of one another, right? Cut out animation, little bits and pieces. So what you're looking at is a top view of your work table and a cross section of your work table. But if you never animated on a camera, you would have no reason to think of it that way. But the creators of After Effects had, and they did, and this is what they're referencing. Hopefully this will be a little clearer, especially when we begin animating in time. Like, let's, let me save this. Let's bring up a complex project. Especially when you start dealing with a really complex project, and it's going to take a minute. And you need, you need to keep a sense of where you are. So each of these is a timeline in and of itself, but at any given point you're looking at a cross section of your table, of the layers that are sitting on your table. So, where were we? Depth of field. So, in photography, right, depth of field is the range of things that are in focus. How many of you are fans of 3D, by the way, stereo 3D? No? Yeah. We might touch on it a little. Do you have any stereo 3D stuff here, like any equipment to work in it, or is that of interest? To me, in general, what'd you say? Yeah. If anyone is interested, you can get a $250 monitor from LG that works with those polarized lenses you can fail to return from a movie theater. Much better than the ones that use the shutter glasses, which cost like $50 to $100. Right? There's multiple different technologies for 3D. But one of the reasons, for those of you who don't like 3D, I've heard one of the reasons that it is often headache-inducing is that in nature we can choose what to focus on with two eyes, right? We can choose within our field of view what we, but a conventional lens cannot have everything within its field of view in focus all the time, right? The area of the lens that is in focus is called the depth of field. Now there are new lenses coming out that have everything in focus all the time. Litro camera, if anyone's heard of that. There's apparently a competing technology got invented at Harvard or MIT recently, which uses antennas. You've heard of this? Heard of this?
What did you say? I'm sorry, the last.
It's a litro-like thing, but instead of using many tiny lenses in an array, it uses antennas.
Oh,
A grid of antennas. That's all I know. Yeah.
You mean the tensor display? Yeah, by the Ramesh group at
Cool.
MIT.
MIT. So I know it was somewhere, Boston area. So it these whatever the technology, whatever ends up winning, what all these have in common is that everything is in focus. So presumably a 3D movie shot with these would be much more pleasant to watch in live action. Now, of course, the reason animated movies, at least I find, so much more pleasant to watch often than live action 3D is because it's CG. You can just declare that everything be in focus because the camera's virtual, right? Also miniatures, like if you see like Coraline or Paranorman, like well, it's actually a small-ish. I mean, if you've seen like making-ofs, it's not that small. Like I mean, they have the sets are huge, but the area being shot at any given time is quite small. So it is possible to get a small area all in focus. So then again, they have much better chance of giving us a pleasing image. Anyway, so nothing has to be out of focus with a virtual 3D camera, but sometimes you want it to be, and that is where we get this guy, depth of field, on. Let's move these guys out here. Notice, remember how I was talking about how we use the, but look how these guys are breaking up and starting to get a little blocky, because these are tiny GIFs when I'm moving close to the camera. This is why, especially when you're working with a camera, why you want that 4K source material. Because you will end up positioning things in the scene, too close, and if you're just using 2K source in a 2K video, they will break down. You'll see pixels. That may be part of your aesthetic. Like, if you plan it well, like you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. In fact, this little switch right here, if any of you are into glitch, new aesthetic kind of stuff, you can turn off. You can turn off interpolation, which is the smoothing of things that are scaled up, with this switch here.
So this actually gives you like just by linear scaling?
Yes. I'm sorry, nearest neighbor, I think. I don't know the scaling methods.
Anyway, it gives you block scaling.
It gives you, yes. So that Adobe wouldn't be Adobe if they didn't sort of lard their program with tons of weird little icons that are extremely important, but you can't tell what they do by looking at them. This thing right here gives you low-quality scaling. It's actually a low-quality switch in general. It'll do different things with different effects, but the most common use is if you want to scale things blocky. Right? If you want to work with GIFs, if you want to see hard edges, if you want to see pixels, turn this on. And then it may look more like a deliberate style choice. But anyway, I'm just trying to spread these out so we can get a nice depth of field effect. So I want to move them very far apart. And here, what I'm doing, remember, all the time is using the keyboard shortcuts for different properties, position, and. Did you guys do your After Effects drive-by yet? You already talking about that? Okay. Also, before I forget to remind you, we're having a workshop this weekend, so Sunday from 5 to 8 at iBeam. We're doing the motion capture. Software. So, depth of field. We turn this on, and we change the focus distance, tells us where we're focused. And this number here, this is really just the Z position of this guy. So let's just focus on this guy here, and he's at 711, so let's just type in focus distance 711. Now, the blur, you turn up here, and if this doesn't look, you can say fast rectangle. You can turn up the quality of the blur here. You can really slow things down. In fact, I'm showing this because I think it'll be really interesting to play around with, but if you're just after speed, just grabbing a blur effect and just blurring out something you want blurred is often a much, much faster and less fiddly way of creating this effect. I like I said, I'm showing this so you know it exists, you can play with it. But in general, I mean, this is animation, right? This just select a layer, put a blur on it, you're done. What the situation? So I'm going to move this back from the high quality blur back to the low quality. But where this really comes in handy is if you want to change depth of field in a shot. So notice as I move the point at the focus point, it is blurring out the foreground. So, and remember, and of course, this is all keyframeable, right? Because everything in After Effects. People have asked me, like, how do you learn more about After Effects? And there's really no there, right? You have a down view, right? You have a cross-section view. You have a vast number of properties, and everything is keyframeable, right? Every single thing. So I want to say focus distance, whatever this is, and then I want to over 30 frames. I want to come in and focus on this guy. And there you go. And why not combine this with a camera move? So the other reason I like this little trick with the null is that if you are keyframing a camera move in After Effects, you need to watch both the camera's position in space and what it's looking at. There is a way to get around this with creating what's called a one-node camera, but that's not going to be, I forget again, most of us are CS5 in this class, right? Only CS5? So that I think only came in CS5.5. So I think you should keep everybody on the same page. Look up one-node camera if you want to find an alternate approach. I like this guy though, because essentially there are two properties you can keep track of. Where is the camera and what's it looking at? However, if you parent it to a null, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's just your same old familiar position keyframe. Like I want it to move to this guy. All right, I'm just going to drag it here. As a bonus, it gives you this little path, right? Because it's just a keyframed object. And there you go. Like hopefully this is just the beginning of a wide number of wide array of possible.
I actually missed. I've never seen that blur quality. Where did you change that?
Oh, that is in depth of field options. It's once again it's confusingly named iris shape.
Oh, this is for fun.
Yeah, so it will use. You couldn't change it before? Yeah, like essentially, it is. I guess this is referring to the shape of the physical iris within a camera.
Yeah.
But the upshot is blur quality. More sides equals more blur, more softer blur. Whereas here you can see.
Pay like $300 for the
Really?
Frisch Loft
Right?
plugin.
Yeah. Well, that's mainly like CS6 is unusual because they did some serious improvements under the hood with the cache and all that. But yeah, a lot of times a new version of After Effects will just be like a new plugin they bought. But yeah. What did you say?
They changed something under the
Oh yeah, the essentially RAM previews are now cached. All RAM previews are cached by default. You basically you just choose as a cache. So here, if anyone has, maybe you have CS6 again. Cool. Okay. So there is a memory setting here, media and disk cache, and you just choose the size of the cache. A lot of people get disk. A lot of people who got CS6 and didn't know about this. I didn't have like a whole lot of space free on their hard disk. I think this defaulted to like 50 gigs or something, and then it quickly filled up their hard disk. And they had no idea what was going on. So yeah, you control it in that memory cache size. But yeah, every RAM preview is saved by default. So if you've noticed when RAM previewing, does everyone know about RAM preview? Right? Yeah. Yeah. This. Yeah. Now you probably notice when you press spacebar and play that it will render this green bar, and then if you let's zoom all the way out here, and then if you play a second time, it will play real time. Oh, also notice that I've set the composition frame rate to 12. Now remember, essentially frame size and frame rate, it's all interchangeable in terms of processing power. Meaning, like if essentially, if you drop your 1920 by 1080 frame rate to 12 instead of 24, it's going to be as fast as working at a smaller frame size. I can't work out exactly what, because it's not going to be 960 by 540. A smaller frame size at a higher frame rate. Trade-off. So this is a compromise that goes back to the earliest days of animation. You want to work faster, animate at fewer frames per second. Like if you want to do something, I mean, it's very possible in the course of the class to come up with something, whatever, even if you have a really new machine, come up with something that's too much for it to render quickly, to get quick feedback on what you're doing, drop the frame rate. I usually work at 12 for that very reason, because I'll usually end up trying to do something that takes a long time. Like, don't let this idea that video. I mean, my whole undergrad I didn't understand this. And back then we were working with SD video, so we're working with 30 frames per second. And I thought everything has to happen 30 times per second. I just thought it was this immutable law. Well, your final video needs to be at 30, or needed to be in that day. Right? These days it's 24. Your final video needs to be at a certain frame rate. But while you're working, your lossless work files don't need to be. So yeah. Anyway.
So
yeah.
do you just make a new comp with your final frame rate?
You could. You could make a new comp at the end with a final frame rate and drop it in, right? That's one way of solving it. Just for space reasons, I usually like to render out a lossless master at my actual frame rate I worked at. So if it's 12, why waste the space? And then bring that master in to render out in different formats into ProRes and always 24 frames per second. The submasters you give out and send out to the world and show, you do always want to respect standard frame rates. For instance, YouTube's encoder, a lot of the aggregators, video aggregators, their encoders will get confused if you give them a low frame rate. So like if you I've made this mistake before, you upload a HD video that's 12 frames per second to YouTube and it'll think it's SD.
What if you're working with video that you're importing that has its own original frame rate?
Right. Well, it depends on where you're going from that. Like you can, if you're going to integrate, like doing VFX, like you're going to go back to the same video, then you just work with the video's frame rate. If it's 24, if it's 23.976, you sort of. But if you're bringing video into animation, then it's your call, right? You can speed it up, slow it down, work with the video at half its frame rate, and.
I think you can just clarify. So you start working with 12 until the end.
If you want, yeah.
Okay, and then you can just convert at the end, right?
Exactly, right. And remember that speed and frame rate are two different things. We're going to play a little bit with live video today, and I have brought let me paste this link here into the wiki, a little DSLR video clip. Where are we? Files. I'm gonna. Okay. And save. So option click to download. Right? Okay, it's going to drag this in. This is some DSLR video. And remember that that frame rate is not the same as speed, right? You can have, and After Effects is very good about this. You can have a 12 frame per second comp, and the video is playing at normal speed. It's just leaving out every other frame. You can also use the effect posterize time, and that will just let you set an arbitrary frame rate without changing your whole comp frame rate. You don't want to do that. So another fun thing to do is integrate live action footage into an animation using match mode. How many of you have ever played around with that? Right? So the new there are, if you want to download this, And one speed tip too. This seems to play back reasonably well, but I would really recommend working with not working with H.264 video when you do. Oops, cancel. When you what I would do if you shoot, and of course most video you shoot, right? If you shoot in DSLR, if you obtain video, it will probably be in H.264. What I would do is, how many of you have the QuickTime 7 player installed here? Show the old player. That's a great one if you want to say export, options, settings, ProRes. And just the original ProRes 422 is usually fine. If you're working on something really special, you might want to use the high quality one. But in general, ProRes 422. So you can use that to export. There is a simple little QuickTime device called Compress Movies, made by Isadora folks. A lot of this you can find also. I've compiled a list of, and this is available from the site, of free software tools. So from our class site here, there is essential free software. And there's Compress Movies. So these are a lot of helpful little free widgets. So Compress Movies, you can just drag and drop a clip, and it will compress it for you. And what's nice is that it will remember what you did last time. So you just need to set this once instead of every time, as with many. ProRes has no settings. That's the glory of it. Don't need to set. You usually, when you're doing this, you usually want to say current size. And there we go. Now, having set that up, you can drag new stuff onto Compress Movies, and it will do it at the same time. For more full-featured converting, there's a wonderful free thing, MPEG Stream Clip. This is incredibly powerful, but it may be too much if you just want to get some camera video into ProRes. But this can do batch conversion. This can do, yeah, it's really powerful. So that's all here. Where are we? Right, so here we have this. Notice that it's much larger, right? This is 447. It won't be much of a step down in quality. I mean, maybe there's some scrambling, but in general, ProRes is so much higher bandwidth than H.264. There shouldn't be a quality loss. Right? It's not necessarily, as a rule of thumb, generation loss happens every time you re-render something. But if it's a bigger codec, if it's a higher bandwidth codec, you should be pretty safe. And the point here is that we want the extra speed. And even on this relatively fast machine, I'm going to bring this in. It's out of the way. Here's our ProRes version. Drag that in. And look how here I am scrubbing the ProRes version. And here I am. We're not giving us enough of a challenge. In general, you're facing a speed penalty. Once you do it once, it should it's beginning to catch this. Okay, well, your mileage may vary. It basically, if you are running too slow, as a rule, still, as you throw more effects on, as you build more complicated compositions, it's probably still worth trying to convert your doing that intermediate rendering of your H.264 material. And increasingly, I'm having students who say they don't. So you can try using stuff direct, and then if things start to bog down, know that the standard best practice is still to convert it to a higher quality intra-frame codec. So,
Can I also add one thing?
yeah.
Because, well, if you ever run into speed problems with After Effects, and you've already completed a part that you needed for reference, the best thing to do is use it as a proxy. Like, just search After Effects proxy online, and you'll find a way to do that. You just render a part, it saves it to disk, and you use that proxy instead of the original animating.
Yeah. Although weird things can happen if you use a proxy at a different resolution than your original. Like, I actually find as time has gone on, I've used proxies less and more, and well, and of course it's different it may be different in live action, where you simply have a greater volume of material. But I more rely on tricks like dropping the viewer resolution. Remember that this window here, this doesn't affect the resolution of your project. This is just the resolution of the window. You can get a big speed boost by going from full to half to third if you need it. So I would like to insert these little horseman guys into this video footage. There are 3 ways to do match move in After Effects. If you go up into, and it's probably worth actually following along because you'll probably be lost otherwise if you haven't done this before. So probably good to download that test clip if you don't have, and this is a kind of footage that tracks well, right? There's lots of clearly visible planes. There's not a lot of camera movement. Stuff tends to be present in the whole shot. People don't cross in front. Excuse me.
It's definitely the hardest thing is to identify if your footage that you're looking at has these issues that you don't realize could not be tracked.
Yeah. So there are 3 ways of, there is the old track motion panel, which is, we've played this before, it's finicky enough, it's probably not worth going into. I mean, don't have to watch this to, do we even, I think they may have even taken it out, the old track motion.
The two dot, 4 dot.
Right. Do we have the...
Yeah, I don't know, it's track type.
Right, yeah, here we go. This is the old one, where you would select an area to be tracked. The little box is the feature you're tracking, and the big box is the area that it moves over.
The next frame.
At the next frame, yeah.
So you have to think about it, if there's a lot of movement,
Oops.
you want it to search a lot of the area
Right.
for the next frame.
But then again, the thing is that After Effects tracking filters, well, it used to be really dumb. So it would just look for any feature that seemed similar without
Right, see?
tracking motion.
It's already gotten confused.
It'll leave.
Yeah. This really didn't work very well. I mean, it's... yeah, you can see it's already losing the corners of that. You guys, any trackable features you'd recommend trying this on?
Everything stays in frame, right?
You could use the headlights, sorry, the backlights on the car.
Cool.
That's like very different from the background and easily trackable.
And it's in circular, so it hasn't.
No, just the edges. The thing is that okay.
You know, when you increase the range, if it keeps going continuously of a similar color, it will leave it. If you use something enclosed like those headlights, which are really good, it'll decrease the image. That's what I found.
Let's try the car
Because there's
headlights.
nothing close to your body that's similar to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Once again, this is a really finicky way of working, but this will work for all your versions of After Effects will have this available. And here, track forward. It lost it. Yeah, so where it will lose it, we're tracking forward or back, and this process will be similar across all your different ways of doing match move. You can figure out where your camera was. You can adjust it and then try to track again.
But
this one basically sucks.
I actually never even use the
Yeah.
fast way. I
Right.
usually just do
Which,
frame by frame.
right? Yeah, because you need so much manual intervention. A lot better is this one called Mocha. Now, everyone with After Effects CS4 and higher will have this. Mocha tracks planes, right? So we're going for points, and then now we're talking about planes. Now, where it is changed. So CS6 people, later, CS6 people will find it here. CS4, 5, 5 people will find it in the After Effects folder as a standalone app. But what you want to do with that, frame range, how many frames do we have in our comp here? 106, 107. Type in. No need to track everything. So with this one, among these confusing array of tools, you get all the pens are slightly different. Does anyone ever figure out the difference between Bezier curves and X splines?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is the difference?
The curve handles,
Mhm.
the X doesn't have that.
Doesn't have handles?
X splines have weights,
Mhm.
like one weight per section of the curve, and there you go, one weight per section of the curve, or per vertex actually. And Beziers have 2 weights, directional weights.
So you can change the slope going in and out.
Right. Okay. So one of these guys, either the X-spline or the Bezier, and you define a plane in your shot. And then you say analyze forward. And this is phenomenally effective compared to the old After Effects strategy. And there's one more method that's even better. We'll get to.
It's crazy what it's doing right now. It's actually looking at all of the pixel data from frame to frame, how it's changing, and calculating that transformation data.
This is really solid. Like this is compared to the other method where you saw, it's a stationary car in broad daylight, and yet it got confused about where those features were. And this is solid. Any plane. Now, if we were driving on the road, if that feature was disappearing, that wouldn't work so well. But any feature that stays constant, it can track. Then when you're done, now see if this seems familiar. You click on Export Tracking Data, and you want transform data out of this. Copy to clipboard. Let's paste this to the clipboard. This was, in fact, how I discovered
Beautiful.
the After Effects keyframes could be copied. So, ironically, this is legit Adobe software. We're using this exact same methods that we use in our weird processing apps. Copy that data to the clipboard, and now I'm going to take one of these little guys. Bring back to center. Notice that I just turned off 3D. Let's get rid of the camera. Position. Where is he? Oh, we're in the layer view. There we go. Right. So now this just floats on top. But if I paste
Remember, you have to think of it has to be in Mocha. You have to get that point that you're going to lay it down.
Where's it? In Mocha, is it?
So in Mocha, after you do the track,
Mm-hmm.
you want to isolate that little point.
Mm-hmm. Which point?
Up at the top, next to that, go to your right,
Mhm.
keep going. You see that like square within a square thing?
Right.
Underneath there, go look below. Right there to your right. Keep going. Yeah, right. The next one.
Selected tangents?
No, the next one. Right there, that.
So planar surface, right?
So you have to choose a point now in that surface that you want to place your animation in.
Right.
So that's the data that's going to be applied to your animation.
Huh. So what is that? Does that affect the anchor point of the?
It's yeah, it's kind of like the anchor point.
Right.
But it allows you to use, allows you now to use the data from this frame size and apply it to a point in your next comp.
What property gets affected there?
There's something wrong where the numbers are not matched right. Where did you see when you pasted it? Did you
Well-
notice how it's
Well,
it's
right.
not in the right spot?
Sure. And that creates an offset somehow.
Yeah, that helps with offset. And the second thing you have to do is you have to make that layer in After Effects the same size as your comp.
Right. Well, what I was going to do was after pasting that in. If we did a pre-comp, oops, exactly right. Just let's go layer pre-comp, the pre-comp thing, and move all attributes inside, and then we can just
So that's just a little bit off.
right. Okay. Interesting.
It's always so confusing to me. But
Mhm.
the steps I usually do is just what you did, I tracked that plane, and then I pick a spot that I'm going to place the object in
Right.
using that cursor. You can move that box around.
Right. Or is our anchor point off? Here. Where is the anchor point? Let's turn this off so I can see. Okay, export tracking data. Let's see how this would be different.
So you can. Ah, nice.
It's not working too well either.
That's actually cute.
Yeah. But no, but it's not locked to the. Hopefully this should work. Position segmentation. This doesn't seem to be very high quality track either. Maybe that's well because this isn't. Anyway, yeah,
We're getting there.
we're getting there. Well,
The
this.
second coming.
What's it? The well, that's where we get to the third one. This has all been essentially. Everyone before CS6 has to use one of these two, and I'm not sure what's going on here, but
Customer skill.
what is it?
Customer skill.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
Could you quickly, sorry, could you quickly reiterate where you put
Right.
the data from the, the data?
Right,
you
yeah.
took from the picture? I didn't.
Yeah. Essentially, you get your export tracking data. You get your position, scale, and rotation out. Copy to clipboard, and then paste onto a shape, say.
Sorry, where did you paste it?
Yeah, just Command V, the same as we were doing in processing, where we could generate some keyframes, then paste them onto a shape. But
On the word shape layer one.
yep, or well, on whatever
So you
item.
put that, and then you
Mhm.
put Control V.
Yeah. But
And where,
Yep.
sorry, where did you get the screen, that other screen
Mhm.
that says,
in CS6, you get to it by
that's the Mocha thing, right?
animation, track, Mocha.
Okay.
And it needs to be a video layer. Animation, track, and Mocha. But if you're in CS4, CS5, CS5, you're going to find that in a separate app in your After Effects folder. But all this is really left behind by the new tracker in CS6, which you get to here, track camera. You basically don't have any options to set at all. You simply say track camera, and it thinks for about 5 minutes. And then when it's done, it will either say error, footage not trackable, or it will say ready, create camera.
You have that now. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fire and forget motion tracking. There is nothing to set, there's nothing to guide. It just analyzes the scene and tries to come up with a track. There is this is one of the most important features of CS6. New features. It simply figures all this out for you. This has been available like in higher end CG for a long time.
Does it work well?
Yeah, when it works. It's helpful to try the other two manual methods in order to get a sense for what will work and what won't. Otherwise, you'll just be like, you'll shoot some footage and it will say can't track this, and you won't know why. Like essentially, you want some features to be present all the time in what you're tracking. Now, cooking show style, I have got, so when it's done, this button is ready, and then it says create camera. But, oops. So here we are with the same footage. If you get this, double click on the missing piece. And, oh, wait, this is why I'm confused. Last night I was preparing these. This was done with Mocha. It was working fine then. So yeah, I did the same thing. I did the track, and then I pasted position, scale, and rotation in the same. I did exactly the same as we'd done before.
Like I said, make sure you have this.
Yeah.
When you apply the tracking data, the layer is the same exact size as your destination.
But this isn't. This is a shape layer.
Oh, it's just a regular shape.
Yeah. This is.
But
I mean,
the shape layer is still in the same length and width as your.
we'll figure this out. Like this is. I mean, it definitely has worked before. Like this is a video I did a few years ago. This is where that sample clip comes from. This was all done with Mocha because there's that shot. So all of these tracks, because it's Windows, right? Perfect for planes, which is what Mocha tracks. So it worked. Yeah, it normally works. I'm doing something wrong in the example, but it wasn't happening last time. And so for some of these shots, if I was doing this all over again, some of these shots might still work better with Mocha. Probably nothing will work better with that old point tracker. That's just something that's available to all of you, no matter what version of After Effects you have, going pretty far back. Really frustratingly, I was working on a project with a lot of match moving just as the first Mocha version came out. Really, like days after. So this was done with the Mocha track, but here's the output of that camera tracker, the fire and forget one, the CS6 one. And the neat thing about that, right? Mocha generates keyframes, so you have to paste keyframes into every object that you're going to insert into the scene. Whereas the new 3D tracker is actually generating a camera for you. And it kind of falls apart at the
This
end.
is only on CS6?
Yes. Right. This is only on CS6. Mocha is CS4 and higher, and then the point tracker is way back higher. If you want to experiment with this is huge because the CS6 method actually drops a camera in there. Let's get this back. Put this guy in here. Or we have to say loop out. Oh, whoops. That was position. Layer. Time remapping. Yeah, the reason I was going to do the, I guess 255. Luma key is the same. Okay, so notice that right now this is not being tracked together with the green triangle. That's because only 3D layers are affected by cameras. So this looks like a similar outcome to the Mocha thing that we were looking at before, but it's actually very different because we've actually generated a camera. This is really, really powerful because you now can throw anything into that scene if you have a good track, and it will move it around in sync. You need to turn on 3D layers to make them effective, and now look how well this is attached to the floor. And what's great is it's so easy to move things around in space. All right, let's add some position keyframes and position them. Of course, if you wanted to move them behind this, you can mask it out over itself. Has anyone ever done stuff like that, like masking a layer? Oops, where are we? Go. If you want someone to cross behind something, and you may need to track and use something called the roto brush.
You like that?
It for getting pieces out, it doesn't necessarily work well on more complicated stuff. But so here I have a layer up top. Oops. Getting better. Let's just use this for now.
What was that?
This is the roto brush.
What's it do?
It creates a mat
It's nice, like,
So
that you paint on, and it tries to track it over time.
So the problem is, there's no depth here, it's just pixels.
But you can cut out pieces of the image and sort of pop them onto their own layer.
Exactly.
So you can make them a layer and then put something in between. So
Right.
it looks like it's traveling behind.
Right,
Much like in Photoshop.
Totally.
Right.
So this calculates pixels and pixel that shape that he highlighted. It's pretty good.
Where is the? I don't remember how do we bake the rotobrush into a mask?
It's down, render, freeze. See it underneath your timeline on the video. It says
Right.
render, freeze.
Really?
Is it that one?
These are all view options.
Up top. Actually, like right underneath your video. See, I see view, rotobrush. I thought freeze makes it keyframes.
Apply rotobrush. Rotobrush.
Push that freeze button.
What is the freeze button?
Right. Look
Yeah.
at the end of your timeline.
Right.
Yeah, right
There you go. Well, that phrase.
Cache and lock segmentation for rotobrush.
Wow, that takes really long to bake
Yeah.
for like vertices. Vertices. Sorry.
But notice how the process is really similar to tracking, right? All this is based on computer vision advances. I mean, to connect to the
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no.
Could you use the sort of the keyframes of the tracking data here, to emulate realistic camera shape in a fully animated scene?
Yep.
Yes.
Another way to do that, I'll show you in a second, is you can use motion sketch plus the camera point of view and a simple expression.
There's also like there's an expression we use called wiggle.
Well, yeah, but
That doesn't often generate a human-like camera shake. But yeah, that's actually worth looking into as well. Oh, okay. We were just stuck in the. No, we still have the. I will look at that at the break. Applying the roto brush to this footage. The whole point is to create a layer that these guys can pass behind, right? So they can pass behind elements in the shot. And without the roto brush, you would have to cut them out frame by frame. Yeah. Mocha also has a roto brush-like effect, but in general, doing it all within After Effects is probably a little simpler. So yeah, to do a human-like camera shake, let's open up that. So we had a parented layer for an easy way to aim the camera. So to do this kind of work, using motion sketch to direct what the camera is looking at, you can say, and actually using that last 3D tracking method, extracting a camera from your actual footage and then just dropping it into your shot could work. But often what you're pointing the camera at in the shot may not be where you want it to go in your animation. So if I'm going to create a second null. And I'm going to call it the camera point of interest, POI. And I'm going to use, this is going to be a 2D null, not a 3D null, and I'm going to use motion sketch to move it around. So I'm going to get the motion sketch panel out here. I'm going to start capture. I'm going to move it around. Now, I can't just point. Remember, you parent whole layers to each other, but to point properties to each other, you need expressions. So I can't just option click and point the expression, or sorry, use an expression to point the point of interest of the camera at the position of the layer. Without things going wrong. Does anyone know what's going on here? No. I option click on the camera's point of interest, and then I use the pick whip to point this at the layer.
You have two values versus
Exactly. This is a 3D. The camera point of interest is a 3D array, and this is a 2D layer. Why? Because Motion Sketch only works with 2D.
And then that's why you use the connected.
Right. Well, or here you can just say var x equals within an array 0. And I want to post this on the wiki so you can all use it. Var x, var y. Remember, get rid of those, and then z is just 0. Get rid of these crazy properties within After Effects as quickly as you can. All right, so now we're just working with x, y, z, right? We're not working with this compound layer, now. And then x, y, z. But it's still off. The reason is that camera point of interest is calculated from the center of the comp. So we want to say, we could say minus 960, minus 540 for this particular comp, which is HD. But to make this general, minus parens this comp dot width divided by 2 minus this comp dot height divided by 2. And there's our camera shake. And remember, once you've done this is all keyframes, right? Too shaky, smooth it. The smoother is a really great. It's going to add a wonderful, lively element to the animation. And I'm going to paste this up here. But another thing that Claire was pointing out is the wiggler. This is a wonderful little panel where you can just graphically, you have two keyframes. They can even be the same thing. You click the property to select them all, or select them both manually with the mouse. And you say how many wiggles and how many pixels, what's the magnitude. And you can make them shake.
By the way, does the expression wiggle create the same results every time?
Yep.
So it has the same seed, basically. Use that.
Because if you apply the same wiggle parameters, it's
Oh yeah, it's evaluated every frame and it has to. So it's got the same seed.
same seed.
So, and it's the same properties, frequency, amplitude, magnitude as they call it.
Yeah, so like, you could probably, if this layer is not parented, you could like, just set an expression, wiggle expression on a null or something to control that layer instead of having to use the wiggle tool every time.
And if you have an expression that you like and you want to turn it to keyframes, you can always say convert expression to keyframes.
That's nice because it performs better.
Right. And notice that here it's disabled the expression for you. So now you just now you just have the keyframes that it generated. Has anyone come across these little guys? Notice these keyframes are not diamonds; they're round. Okay, so that's ease. This isn't something you need to mess with unless you're interested in it. But if you want to take advantage of it, you can really put some nice finesse into your animations. If you command click on an expression, notice that it gets round, and that is ease in and out. If you look at the graph, notice that the Notice that the layers you have turned into circles. Oops, where are we here? Comp 1, turn off the graph. And then the little pinchy circle means you've modified its Bezier curve. You can also bring up the graph here. Like if you click the graph window by itself, or I'm sorry, click the graph window here, you can bring the. But notice how the round ones are smoothed and the diamond-shaped ones are linear. So you can subtly change your animation by manipulating in the graph. There is also, this is easier to show on a new comp. And move from here to here. Notice that it starts at its and stops at the same. It starts at speed and then stops without slowing down. You can also, in addition to rounding, applying curves on the graph by command clicking, you can also, in the animation menu, say easy ease in and easy ease out. So now it will slowly accelerate and decelerate.
So you use it on the opposite side.
What'd you say?
Use it on the opposite side.
It's ease out and then ease in.
That did nothing.
Right, but
You use out.
why you ease into a value and ease out from it?
Out is from this keyframe on.
From this keyframe.
So this is easy is in what you need on the opposite. If you time reverse D, then we'll be okay. But in this case,
Actually, let's just take the opportunity to move the anchor point over here. A lot of times when you create things like shapes, their anchor points will arrive in weird places. Let's have this move a little more drastically. So you're saying that if you easy.
yeah, that's not out. Yeah, just try that. Just try that without. Okay, this is like the best way to create quick. There we go. If you don't care about the other keyframes, then just F9 will do easy ease on both sides.
Well, that's the graph, right? The command click.
So what's a circle? What's that?
That is the easy ease general, right? It smooths it on both sides,
No,
right? No.
That's the square with the two triangles eating out of it. That's the.
Isn't that when you modify it? No?
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's easy ease unmodified, or
Yeah, it's nothing, and then that is.
so what is the circle then?
The circle is just a point that is, well, it used to be a point for just for reference that you can do Bezier curves on it. So that's the only point that you can put in the middle of a curve, just to move it around. Like go to the middle of that of those two keyframes, like in between them, and create a keyframe and switch it to circle, and look what it does to the animation. That's the graph.
Right.
That's the graph.
Right.
Nothing, and then when you move it down or something,
It's modified.
look what it does to that. There you go.
Right.
So it's just a reference.
Yeah, there's something else called like growth over time keyframe versus
Exponential scale. No.
growth over time. It's this weird keyframe where it does the parameter change over a time period, not over a frame period. I have no idea what that means.
Right.
But it is a circle as well. So you're like, what does that circle do?
You can do these things from break.
Is it? Okay.
It's okay. And then you don't mind.
Right. Sure. It's funny. I always thought this was the unmodified easy ease. But
That sounds like
That's
what you
interesting.
described too, unmodified disease. It has the Bezier handles, but it's not. It hasn't changed.
well, let's see if they look any different on the graph. Here's this guy. And then inserted from
And that
scratch.
one has no handles. When you look at this one, it won't have-
Wow.
So what you have there is when it's in the middle, like
Right.
it goes down to 0, and
Right.
comes back up, versus slowing down in or slowing down out. I have no idea what the circle means.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you've ever had this problem before that when you're animating something, you're like, why is this stopping?
Right.
Stop and it's going.
Exactly. And that's essentially what I've done in those situations is just reset it to unused linear keyframe in the graph, and then done it again.
Okay. So I have to try every one in order for it to make sense and I still don't know what that circle is doing.
Mhm.
And whenever I go to the graph, that's usually confusing me. even
Right.
more. Like, I don't know what is going on in the graph.
Hmm.
If you don't know.
Yeah. Because there's no way to create the circle icon except command clicking on a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. I always thought it was an unaltered easy, but you're right. They start from different positions. These start from unmodified, and these.
Are we taking a break? Like
Yeah.
half the class is walked out of the room.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm like really.
Anybody have natural?
The ER minus.
Yeah, I have no clue.
Okay, so that settles that. That they easy ease by itself drops it to 0.
I'm guessing that's why it stops.
Right. So, but any modification to the Bezier handle changes it to the easy ease icon. I'm gonna guess that the circle